All right, so let's dive into something.
Yeah.
I think this is really relevant to all of you listening, especially if you're, interested in building great teams and all that.
hmm
We're going to be talking about DEI today.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Exactly. And in particular, we're looking at this sort of backlash against DEI
Yeah, a lot of pushback.
and what it means for those star performers out there. The ones you're always trying to recruit and develop.
Yeah, yeah. And we're really lucky to have all of these responses from leading academics in this field. It gives us a really good look at how this pushback could impact those of you out there trying to build great teams.
So I think a good place to start would be with Professor Herman Aquinas,
A gwins.
like the beer.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers to them.
He's not suggesting that we get rid of DEI programs or
Yeah,
anything,
no.
but he thinks that we should focus on improving them
Absolutely.
and really trying to reduce those negative consequences he talks about.
You know, he makes a really good point. A poorly designed DEI program can actually backfire. Oh, yeah. You can create more problems than you solve if you're not careful. You really have to be intentional and strategic about it.
So then what's the alternative? Like, do we just ignore DEI?
No. Think about it this way. Well-designed DEI initiatives can address those systemic biases that can prevent talented people
Yeah.
from rising to the top. We're talking about creating a level playing field here, which, let's be honest, is really important when you want to attract and keep the best people.
Because, if you're a top performer, you want to know you're being judged based on your skills and abilities,
Of course.
not because of your background or anything like that.
Absolutely. And we see a lot of professors in these responses, folks like Mickey Hebel and Eden King. They argue that DEI strengthens meritocracy
Mhm.
when it's done right. They say that it ensures that success is based on merit and not privilege.
Makes sense to me. And, it makes me think about the example that Diana L. Stone brought up, the Navajo code talkers.
Oh, in World War II. Yeah.
What a great example of how diversity of thought and experience can really change things.
For sure.
Their language skills helped the Allies win. Who knows what would have happened if they had been dismissed
Right.
because they didn't fit in.
Exactly. And it just reminds us that sometimes those unexpected perspectives are exactly what you need. To solve a problem or gain an advantage over your competition. This is really applicable to anyone out there who's building a high-performing team because a diverse group of people
Right.
allows you to tap into a wider range of skills and perspectives. And that can lead to better problem solving and more innovation.
Okay, so DEI can help make a company more competitive. But I got to be honest, I'm a little concerned about some of this pushback we're seeing. Professors like Alison Pullen and Oscar Holmes IV, they seem to be pretty worried that anti-DEI rhetoric is going to fuel exclusionary practices
Yeah.
and that it could even threaten some of our democratic values.
And Professor Pullen even uses the term brutish masculinity to describe the way that DEI is being attacked in some circles. She's making the argument that this kind of aggression harms everybody, even the people who might think they're benefiting from it.
So it's not just about the workplace. It's about the kind of society we're building.
Right.
And that's where it gets tricky.
Right.
Because how do we reconcile the need for DEI with these concerns about fairness
Yeah.
and, this idea of meritocracy that keeps coming up?
Well, Joan C. Williams brings up a really good point about this. She says that we need to use data-driven approaches,
Data.
both to mitigate bias and to achieve our DEI goals. She suggests that we should be using tools like bias interrupters, which can help us identify and address these little biases that we all have that can impact things like hiring and promotions and even performance evaluations. And that can have a huge impact, when we're thinking about star performers, those high achievers.
Right.
Imagine if they're not getting the recognition that they deserve
Yeah.
or the rewards because there's some bias in the way that their performance is being evaluated.
It's almost like we need a system
Yeah.
to check our systems. You know what I mean?
Right.
Make sure they're really rewarding people based on what they do and not just on, who they are.
Yeah, and that's exactly what these bias interrupters are designed to do. They
Okay.
help us, see those unconscious biases that we all
Yep.
have so we can try to fix them.
Right.
So, let's just say, for example, your data shows that there's a difference between men and women in terms of promotions within a particular department.
Okay.
These bias interrupters, they can help you figure out, is that because of their performance? Or is it because of some unconscious bias in how they're being evaluated?
Okay. So that's a pretty good way to deal with the potential problems of DEI
Yeah,
and make sure that it's really working the way it's supposed to.
absolutely.
But what about this idea that if we focus on DEI, then we have to sacrifice meritocracy? There were several professors who don't agree with that, including Ian O. Williamson.
Yeah. Professor Williamson actually says that leaders have a choice to make.
Well,
They can stick with the old ways of doing things, a homogenous past,
right.
or they can embrace all of the opportunities that come with a diverse workforce. And he points out that there's tons of research that shows that diversity can really drive innovation and success when it's managed well.
It's like that saying, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten.
Right, exactly.
If you want different results, you've got to try different things.
And that's where DEI comes in. It's not about giving handouts or lowering standards or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's about expanding our definition of talent and potential.
I like that.
Recognizing that a team with lots of different perspectives and experiences
Yeah.
will be better at solving problems, coming up with ideas, and adapting to the world around them.
So instead of seeing DEI as a threat to meritocracy, it's actually a way to make it better,
Yeah,
to make sure we're really finding and developing the best people out there.
absolutely. And that brings us to a really great point that Karen Lee Ashcraft makes.
Yeah.
She challenges us to think about DEI in a new way,
Yeah.
not just about reducing bias.
Right?
Can we create workplaces where everyone feels like they belong
Right.
and that they're respected and they have the power to contribute?
That sounds like a great team to me.
It does, right? And if you're trying to get those high performers
Yeah.
and keep them around that kind of inclusive environment is so important.
It is, because those top performers, they're not just looking for money.
Right.
They want to feel like they're part of something
Of course.
and that they can make a difference.
Absolutely.
And a really inclusive culture where everyone feels welcome is a great way to attract those people.
It is. And, you mentioned this earlier. A good DEI program can help create that sense of fairness and transparency
Right.
that high performers are looking for.
Because they want to know that the system is fair
Yes.
and that everyone has a chance.
Exactly. And when they see that, they're more likely to stick around and be engaged.
So it's like this positive feedback loop.
Absolutely.
DEI attracts and keeps great people, which leads to innovation and success.
Yes.
And that success makes people value DEI even more.
It's a beautiful thing, but we do have to acknowledge the challenges.
Yeah.
Gary and Powell makes a good point.
What's that?
He says it's really important to protect the work that's been done on DEI in the face of all this backlash.
So he's worried that all this pushback
Yeah.
could actually slow down progress.
Yeah.
And discourage people from doing research and trying to make things better.
Yeah, there's a risk that some organizations might get scared
Oh, yeah.
and not want to invest in DEI anymore.
Because they're worried about what people will think or about getting sued.
Exactly. But Ellen Ernst Kossak has a more positive outlook.
Oh, okay, good.
She thinks that this backlash might actually force organizations to use more evidence-based approaches to DEI.
So instead of just creating programs because they feel good, they'll actually use data
Yes.
to make sure that their DEI initiatives are actually working.
Exactly. And those data-driven strategies like the bias interrupters we talked about can be really effective at identifying and fixing bias, which leads to better outcomes for everybody.
So this backlash might actually be a good thing in the long run.
It could be.
It could force us to be more thoughtful and strategic about how we do DEI.
And ultimately lead to more meaningful and lasting change.
Yeah.
It's interesting, though, because not everyone that we're looking at is simply saying, let's just keep doing what we're doing, but better.
Right.
Some of them are actually asking some more challenging questions.
That's like that. Give me the juicy stuff.
Well, like Professor Jawad Syed,
Okay.
he argues that a lot of DEI advocates have been pretty quiet about certain issues going on around the world, and he sees that as a form of hypocrisy
Okay.
that actually weakens the whole movement.
So he's saying that there's a difference between, trying to make companies more diverse and this bigger fight for, global equity.
Exactly. And he goes so far as to say that this backlash against DEI
Right.
could be a wake-up call,
Okay.
like a chance to rethink our priorities
Right.
and build a movement that's more inclusive and tackles more kinds of injustice.
So it's like he's saying, don't just focus on changing who's in the boardroom,
Right.
but look at the systems that are causing these problems all over the world.
Exactly. And then we have Professor Patrizia Zanoni,
Okay.
who sees this whole backlash as part of this bigger political fight between progressives and conservatives.
So she's saying it's a battle for like the heart and soul of society.
That's a good way to put it. And she thinks that this whole clash could actually lead to a more radical and global equality agenda.
Wow.
driven by the needs of people who are marginalized all over the world.
So it's like this pushback could accidentally create a stronger, more unified movement for social justice.
It's definitely a possibility.
That's pretty wild.
It is, but one thing's for sure. This whole debate about DEI isn't going away anytime soon.
And I think for those of us who really care about building great teams, this is something that we need to keep talking about.
Absolutely, because DEI is connected to so much.
It is.
You know, attracting great people, creating a culture where everyone can thrive.
Right.
All of that is so important for building a successful team.
It really is, and it all comes back to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
It does.
So as you're all out there building your dream teams, I want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay.
Professor Karen Lee Ashcraft asked, how can we as leaders and organizations, and even just as people, work together to create a future where diversity is celebrated
Yes.
and equity and inclusion are just part of who we are?
A great question to think about.
It really is, and I think the answer is going to shape the future of work and the world that we live in.
I agree.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into DEI.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep working to build a better future for everyone.